In this video, I will show you how to paint these colorful looking glass bottles with easy, simple techniques. Hello, welcome to Run My Arts watercolor series. I'll be demonstrating this painting on Canson cold press watercolor paper, 300 grams per square meter, and the size is A5. And to kickstart, I have already pre-sketched 6 bottles in various shapes and sizes. And if you're interested to download this sketch, you can download it from my Pinterest account. The sketch link is in the description section. So if you would have noticed, I have drawn a horizontal straight line, and I'm going to cover the area below the straight line as I do not wish to stain them during the painting process, and I will come back to making adjustments on the taped area at a later stage. So I will be painting the bottles one by one, and to kickstart I am using a wet on wet technique. So as you can see here, I am pre-wetting the first bottle with some clean water. So you can use any color of your choice as long as it's mixed colors, because I have decided to use the combination of rainbow colors, except that there are only 6 bottles, so 6 colors on this painting. So the first color is permanent carmine. As you can see here, I have painted it lightly with the permanent carmine, and right now I am lifting out some pigment just to reveal some light highlights using another brush. And because this was painted on a pre-wet surface, so the paint appears very smooth and light looking. So I'm going to move on to the second bottle, and I'm going to use an orange paint mix. You can achieve this by mixing your red or permanent carmine with some yellow. So basically you're mixing primary colors to arrive at this particular color mix, and you're just repeating the first technique, which is pre-wetting the sketch surface before you paint them. And as you can see here, I am just adding in the permanent carmine to the first bottle, as I want that shade to bleed onto the pre-wet areas of the second bottle. Now you may be wondering why the need to have the first red pigment to bleed onto the second bottle. It is because I would like to show this painting in a very flowy concept or flowy impression, and it is also an impression of glass bottles that are stacked next to each other, so their color may be reflected on each other's surface. But if you don't wish to achieve this effect, then you can skip this bleeding effect. So moving on to the third bottle, I am using Indian yellow for this painting, and as usual, you pre-wet the surface of the sketch and then paint them with the wet paint. After that, you just lift out some highlights using another dry or damp brush, and also you achieve the color bleeding onto the following bottle or the bottle stacked next to it by pre-wetting the next bottle and allowing the paint to bleed in further. So basically keep repeating these steps for all the bottles using your choice of colors. And if you have difficulties achieving the color bleed from one bottle to another, you can just slightly tilt your painting or the board that your painting is pasted on in order to allow that wet paint to flow further onto the wet areas. Alright, next bottle is going to be in a blue shade. So basically these are just some light washes using the wet on wet technique, and they are definitely going to dry much lighter. So the following steps once the painting is dry would be to determine the dark and light areas in order to define the look of the glass bottles. lifting out some light highlights as usual for both the blue and purple bottles. If you have forgotten to lift the pigments to reveal the highlights, it's totally fine. You can still make some touch-ups at the end of the painting process, and I'll show you how to do it. I'm just lightly brushing the corners of this wet painting of the purple bottle as if there's a reflection on a white wall behind. So if you think you would like to add in more of that flowy paint effect, you can still do it by applying wet paint once again. Reapply wet paint onto the areas that you want to achieve this effect, and just run through your wet brush, a clean wet brush onto it, so that the paint would bleed further onto the wet areas, just like what I'm doing over here. Alright, now that the painting is fully dry, time to make the second layer painting to define the bottle's shape. So for the second layer painting, I am going to use the wet on dry technique, which means you're going to apply wet paint on a dry surface. So for the red bottle, I am just reusing the earlier permanent carmine that I used. But as I said, I am just painting the wet paint onto the dry sketch or dry painting. And since I am supposed to define the dark and light areas, so I am mindful with my brush strokes, whereby some areas of the bottle gets the washes while some are left untouched. So that means I don't apply paint on those areas. So this automatically shows a light area of the bottle. Over here I am just softening the hard edges of the brush stroke using a clean damp brush. Moving on to the second bottle, I am using a darker shade of orange, which means I have added more red onto the earlier orange paint mix that I had in order to make an impact on the dark and light areas that I'm painting right now. And just like the first bottle, I'm only applying the brush strokes to some part of the bottle while leaving the rest with the light shade from the first layer of painting. And after applying the paint, once again I am going to use a clean damp brush to give the paint some light washes so that it doesn't appear too harsh or end up with sharp edges. As for the third bottle, since the Indian yellow looks quite bright and deep in color, I had to go for a shade even darker than this shade. So I decided to use yellow ochre, which appears to be a little bit brownish. And as I paint the yellow ochre, I am sure you can see the contrast between the Indian yellow and yellow ochre. So if I would have painted once again with the same Indian yellow, I am afraid it might not make a good impact on the dark and light areas. As usual, back with the clean damp brush to soften all those hard edges. So repeat these steps until you complete the entire painting of all the remaining bottles. And you might have a question wondering, how do I determine the light and dark areas? Well, I would say you don't have to worry too much about it, since this is an impression of transparent glass bottles. You can just randomly paint the dark and light areas, especially in an environment or ambience where glass bottles are stacked in a group or next to each other with the same light source, especially if it's coming from the top, you can't really tell the definition of the dark and light areas. They seem very random, because this is what I noticed on some reference images on Google. So if you would have studied that, you will realize that it is okay to paint these dark and light areas in a very random manner. In other words, I would suggest you to have a few reference photos, study them through just briefly, and you'll get some idea on how to paint those dark and light areas. As I said, this is the nature of glass bottles when they are grouped together. So just enjoy the process and paint these effects. As long as you maintain some dark and light areas on the painting, you will definitely achieve this effect. Almost done with this violet colored glass bottle. Time to move on to the next step of the painting, and I'm going to reveal the unstained area, which is the masking tape. So I'm peeling off the masking tape to reveal the clean area, and I'm going to paint the reflection of each bottles onto the unstained area or white areas. So to kickstart this next step, I'm just pre-wetting the areas below the bottles, which is the unstained areas, with some clean water. And this time I am going to start painting from the violet colored bottle. And as you can see here, I have dropped in the violet colored paint onto the pre-wet surface. And after that, I'm just dragging the pigment of the violet paint further towards the wet areas using a clean damp brush. So repeat these painting steps for all the bottles. So basically, reflections onto areas or objects other than a normal mirror are supposed to appear very mild in terms of color and even shape. So which is why it is important to use the wet on wet technique in order to achieve this soft reflection look. And if your painting area has dried, you can just re-wet the paper before you drop in those paints. So keep checking your paper condition and ensure they are still wet, or just re-wet them if they are dry. As simple as that. Just a quick mention, if you love experimenting, painting with colorful and bold paints, then you may want to check out this particular tutorial that I made recently. I'll leave the link to this video in the description section. Alright, time for some fine-tuned details, and especially for those who have missed out the first step, as in lifting out pigments to reveal highlights. This is the time for you to make the actual highlights by applying some white gouache paint. So an alternative to gouache paints, you can also use white markers and pastel pencils as well. They work great to create highlights onto watercolor paintings as well. So try them out. So you don't have to apply too much of this paint, gouache paint effect, to create these highlights. Just in a form of scribbles and some minor dots here and there would do the trick. So do not worry too much about it. Just a minimal effect would definitely help you to achieve the highlights. So by now your painting would definitely look like realistic colorful glass bottles. And right now I am going to make one last final touch, which is using a mono drawing pen. You can use any ink pen of your choice, but make sure your painting is dry if you're not using a waterproof pen. So I'm just going to draw in some doodles onto these glass bottles, a very casual one, just to add some extra character to the look of this entire painting. Ta-da! My painting is complete. So what do you think? Don't they really resemble the glass bottles? Even though it was a very simple painting technique. And if you don't wish to finish it off with the ink sketching or doodling, then you can really skip it. It's just my personal choice. In fact, you can even add some cocktail glasses or wine glasses to make it look interesting with some paint spatters. So go ahead, experiment it. So if you liked this tutorial, then don't forget to hit the like and share button. And better still, if you subscribe to my channel. And do hit the notification bell so that you'll get the latest updates from my channel. Because lately I noticed that even my subscribers don't seem to get notified with my new videos. So don't forget to hit the notification bell. So I'll see you again in another tutorial. Bye.